All right, another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also. But again, nobody will actually engage in debate in any kind of reasonable format. Video exchanges, I don't know, reasoned arguments. I mean, doing text arguments regarding physics is a little tricky just because, yeah, it really is all geometry, frankly. You really do have to draw it. Explaining that there's a car with three wheels going 15 miles an hour down a 15-degree incline, blah, it really doesn't work. Anyway. But we just can't get people to participate. Can't get the physicists to participate in a debate. So this is the third video, really. Okay, she did a first video about cranks or crackpot physics. Insulting anybody who disagrees with the standard model. Anybody who disagrees is a flat earther, an idiot, they're egotist, they're all trying to be Einstein, blah, 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 blah. Bunch of psychobabble. Obviously I'll just say these are all, ivory tower fucknuts, privileged class. They all got their heads way up their ass. They only got the physics degree because they were, maneuvering for some sort of prestige. They want that little professor or doctor in front of their name. It's really not about being anything but a pretensive poser. They want the suit. They don't, they ain't enough man to fill it. But anyway, so I just thought I'd point out, she said something about there not being enough women in the crackpot physics. There is. I mean, Fractal Woman, she's a good example. She posted a video, something today about, photons, how she understands something about a photon, which is hilarious, but she's selling it as a fractal or something. It's just such nonsense. So anyway, there's this second video. You probably can't see that title, but, you probably don't need to. Something crackpot is the big word, and then it's about some Loeb guy or something. So anyway, I figure we'll go ahead and see what it is about. So I've downloaded it just to evade all the fucking ads. Because they have to make money. It's all about the money. It's not about science. It's about money, 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 money. Money, money, money. Money, money. Show me the money. Except they won't take my money. That's the irony. They won't take my money. They'll take money from some company selling foreign chicks, I wonder if she allows advertisements. I mean, YouTube does routinely post ads for, buy yourself a desperate foreign woman. I wonder if she's all for that. Oh, this is... the ironies on the internet are just so funny. There's just so many of them. Anyway, the whole, life is just ironic because it's really not life, it's death. You're just, marching towards your grave. Slowly but surely, that's where we're all headed. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. And you're just about doing a good dance, on your way into the hole. All right. So anyway, leave us play the video, see where it goes, see what the hell the point is.
It's October 19th, 2017. Robert Work is an astronomer.
Okay, so this is kind of weird because her channel, the videos are only 2 years old, so I don't know how it could be the 17, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it? Yeah, it says 1 year ago. So apparently she made the video 5 years ago? Weird. Yeah, sorry, that's really weird. All right, anyway.
At a Hawaiian observatory, and he sees something interesting, something unexpected, something sharp, something new. And the cool thing about astronomers is that if you see something exciting, every single astronomer with the capability of observing that object is going to jump to their telescope and do it.
Oh, so interesting. So far, it's not so good, right? Yeah, not so good. Ooh.
Like if a supernova went off in our galaxy right at this second, like neutrino detectors would start like pinging.
Oh, neutrino detectors. There aren't any neutrino detectors.
1,000 people would get a text message. They'd jump to their computers. They'd log on and point the telescope. And that's why I'm against.
So why didn't they do any of that when there was a 12 noon eclipse right over North America? 12 noon. Perfect. Couldn't be a better eclipse. The best seeing from Earth you can get of an eclipse. And they didn't bother doing the Eddington experiment. With all of this big giant telescopes, all this great technology. I mean, I think Mount Washington was right in line. Perfect weather. Didn't even try it. Couldn't be bothered.
Two-factor authentication because it's just really going to slow us down. What was fascinating about this object was that though it looked like a comet or an asteroid, the velocity and the eccentricity of the orbit implied that this object could not be from the solar system. It was going too fast. The eccentricity of the orbit was too high.
Well, it couldn't be that fast or a velocity if it got so substantially bent like that. I mean, I'm sorry, that doesn't even make any sense at all. What the fuck is this gigantic bend? What do you mean it bent outward? It was going towards the sun this way and skidded. Is that what that drawing is? Because the way it looks, that can't happen.
For the first time, we saw something inside our solar system that was not from our solar system. It was an interstellar object. It was observed 207 times over a very short period of time, and then it was gone. It's still in our solar system. It's like past Neptune now, but we won't get to see it again. It's too small for our telescopes to see. So we got all the data we could, and that's all the data we'll get. What did we learn? From spectra,
Ooh, brother. So what does this have to do? What is this? Where's the crank part? Where's this have something to do with crackpot? Eek. You're really gonna just drive me, right into a huge giant depression because you're not gonna get to anything. I mean, it's all clickbait, right? Just this clickbait. She's trying to make a boring, dull, uninteresting subject interesting by calling it something it's not. Big giant anal probing. And she's just going to sit there and talk about, dandruff.
We saw that it's red in color, which is very similar to Oort cloud objects and Kuiper belt objects in our own solar system. From light curves, we could see how it was moving and kind of get an idea of its shape. And the consensus was that it's like a long cigar-shaped object. Also from light curves, we saw that it was tumbling. Not rotating, but tumbling. And we observed non-gravitational acceleration. What does that mean? Newton's laws say that to accelerate an object, you have to apply a force, right? In space, there's not much to apply a force except for gravity. So if something is moving in the solar system, we can approximate its orbit very, very well by just knowing the mass of the sun and saying it's accelerated by the gravity.
Oh, well, so obviously we all know that isn't the game, that, there are these other planets and there is other mass in the solar system that's also going to affect things based on proximity. So if it's very close to Jupiter, then Jupiter's going to be controlling it more than the sun.
Of the sun. So when we saw it move in an unexpected way, we saw non-gravitational acceleration. There's another reason.
Okay, well, that's just silly. So, yes, obviously, if it accelerated, the only thing that could accelerate or change its path, right? It has a velocity. She says accelerate. She's saying somehow it moved without some gravitational influence moving it. I'd say right on the face of it, you say, well, you did your instrument, something's wrong, okay, because there ain't no UFOs. And, if it was hit by a meteor, you would have seen it. So none of that works.
It's sped up. So this is like the perfect science problem, right? You observed something. You have these pieces of information. Now you work backwards. It's a puzzle. You put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and you're like, this is all the information we're going to get. What was this object?
Yeah, so that isn't the truth, right? There's all kinds of more information you can get. So you can obviously study the data deeper and deeper and deeper in terms of checking it and double checking it and all of that kind of crap. So you go pretty deep. And obviously your physics hasn't even bothered to test whether 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same impact force as 1 pound dropped 4 feet. You haven't bothered to even check that one. That's how undeep you go.
For example, like, why was it tumbling like that? Maybe there was a collision a billion years ago and it caused this object to start tumbling in an odd way, and like because there's not a lot of stuff in space, it would take a very long time for it to like stabilize, right? Maybe there was a collision between two like comet like objects in another solar system, and they got stuck together.
More likely, it just hit an asteroid. That's all. It hit another clump of matter, and it hit it unevenly. It hit one side more than the other side. The end. It didn't hit the center of mass. So not even complicated, really.
Together. Now they're like a contact binary, and that's why it gets this like cigar shape. And maybe that collision made it kick out of the system, and that's why it's tumbling. That's why it looks like that. That's why it left its system, and maybe it traveled for a really long time.
All right, so we understand this is the clickbait, right? She has right in a big letters. Okay, she's talking about crackpot, and then she's doing all of this to get to it. Yeah.
Is there any way to tell how old this object is? Not really. Now, why did it speed up? Like, we've seen this with comet objects. Like, if a comet goes around the sun, you see like a tail, and it can speed up. The general consensus is that this is most probably a comet-like object, like the ones in our own solar system, but from another system. It was probably ejected, and there are lots of interesting theories on how you could eject a comet to another solar system.
Wait a minute. So now she's saying it's a comet-like object, which means it's somehow made out of mass that heats up and dissipates, which creates, a thermal thrust. So the reason why comets can change is because one side melts and the other side doesn't, and so that creates an energy differential. It's radiating from one side, not radiating from the other side, so it moves because of that radiation. Now, I don't think this object had any overt appearance of being unevenly heated. If it's rotating, it makes it even harder for it to be unevenly heated. So that doesn't even make sense. It's on a rotisserie, so to speak. It's cooking on all sides.
And we can start thinking about how common this event should be. How common should things escape their solar systems and come to ours? And we could start seeing more. In fact, we did observe another one in 2019. So this is a very exciting discovery. The first interstellar object. It's been named Oumuamua, which is Hawaiian for scout. Because it's the first thing to jump. It's the first thing we've seen just jump into our solar system, and it's very, very, very.
I thought they actually sent a probe out and actually got some video of this thing, right? This funny shaped lump of crud. But whatever. I mean, she's saying this is 2017, so I don't know. So what's the punchline? So this is one of those doofy videos somebody does where, oh yeah, the whole video is a joke, and right at the end I'm going to tell the punchline. Oh, great. Thank you.
Very exciting. However, if you're the head of the astronomy department at Harvard, a tenured Harvard professor, it's not a comet. It's not of natural origin. It's alien technology. This is another video about crackpots. We'll talk about aliens, but first we have to do some background. In my last video on crackpots, I gave you a list of 4 things. These 4 things that are emblematic of crackpots. The first is that a crackpot only works on the...
All right, let's pause and go through the list again. Address the biggest problems in physics. So something wrong with that. Lacking mathematical rigor, so whatever that means, you have to believe their formula. We have to believe in matter and anti-energies and all and forky things. We have to believe all that crap means something. You have to believe in all of the crap they say exists, or somehow you don't have mathematical rigor. All right, respond with anger. Claim physics established has blacklisted them. Cite Galileo, Einstein, etc. Well, Einstein's a good example because the establishment is pretty annoying, right? I mean, Einstein got pretty pissed off because, frankly, they wouldn't publish his papers. They said, oh, we don't really agree with what you're saying, so we're not going to publish an Einstein paper. I mean, when people win the Nobel Prize, I guess you sort of say that, well, no matter what they say, we should publish it, right? Come on. There's only going to be one of those per year. There's only a certain 60 of them alive at any one time. There's only this, 50 of them alive or whatever. Yeah, I think you can just give them a buy. But the establishment is so fucking rigorous and inquisitional, and you must agree with us that they didn't publish Einstein, for fuck's sake. They are not physics theories, and just, whatever. That's just such bullshit. Okay, your dark matter isn't any theory. It's not a theory. It's not even worthy of speculation. It's just so silly. Invisible matter that makes gravity. Yeah.
The most important theories in physics. They work on the biggest problems. So they want to prove that quantum mechanics doesn't work. They want to prove that general relativity is wrong. They want to make a perpetual motion machine.
So she's wearing what, a Harvard shirt? So apparently she's claiming she went to Harvard. I thought West Kentucky University or something myself. I figured that's where she got her doctorate. Some little shithole that needs to make a doctor now and then.
And solve the energy crisis. Things like that. The second thing is that they lack mathematical rigor. They lack evidence. They don't suggest experiments. Like, you can't just prove quantum mechanics.
Amazing. They're doing them all the time. All these Faraday things. They're always playing with magnets and motors and doing all this crap. I mean, no experiments. They're constantly doing experiments, talking about Michelson, Morley, till you're fucking just so sick of hearing the words. They're so obsessed with making the super interferometer. There's some kind of machine that'll find what they're looking for, blah, 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 blah. So what a pile of crap. And this is from a physicist. Again, this is from a physics community that still hasn't proven 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same energy as 1 pound dropped 4 feet. They still haven't proven that. They haven't done that experiment. They haven't tied two a 5 mass going 10 miles an hour and a 10 mass going 5 miles an hour. They haven't even tied a string between those two things to see that the 5 mass has twice the energy. Oh, pathetic.
Right? Because there's thousands of experiments that agree with quantum mechanics, so you would have to suggest an experiment.
So more lying. Okay, so that's just a lie. It doesn't really agree. It only agrees if you put on your fucking crooked glasses, frankly. Your old woman glasses. You got to put on old woman glasses to see it, okay? It's only this, let's bend the truth this much, and then we can see it. And put some clay on it, too. Let's smear some clay on it. So all that two-slit thing is a big lie. Waves don't really work. The math doesn't pan out. It's about surfaces. The two-slit is the 4-surface experiment. The single-slit is the 2-surface experiment. You've got it all fucking wrong, and you just keep claiming you got it right when no, you got it wrong.
That disagrees with quantum mechanics, right? In order for your theory to work. The third thing is that if they see any pushback, any negative comments, anyone suggesting like, maybe you don't understand gravity as well as you think you do, here's a textbook, they will just be angry.
Of course, because you're just pretentious douchebags. You don't have the evidence. If you had evidence on the fucking table, again, the conversation wouldn't exist. You don't have evidence. There's nobody saying evolution. There's no anti-evolutionists who aren't just Christians or Muslims or something, and they're just naysaying. But there's no one making any rational arguments against it, because the evidence is overwhelming. You don't have any of that. Your physics has got the driest pool of evidence going. It's might as well, you might as well just grow cacti in your evidence pool.
They'll write emails in all caps. They will show up at people's offices or at conferences and yell like it's kind of a scary situation. And something else that they do is they cite the physics establishment.
The chicken shits. That's right. Yeah, you can offer them $4,000 to play a 5-minute video, and they won't do it. They'll play a shitty commercial, but they won't play a physics argument that challenges them.
They say things like Galileo was punished by the physics establishment. Galileo.
So this is just a repeat of the first video. She's just making the same silly, stupid arguments again. All right, so I'll just make the same counter argument. Fuck you. Okay, hypocrite. You duplicitous hypocrite. You've got nothing. You make all of these extraordinary claims. I mean, goddamn. Fucking photons are entangled. They know they can read each other's minds and they're conspiring against us and hiding from us. And what a pile of shit.
Had his theory of heliocentrism, and he proved it with his telescope, pointing it at Jupiter, and you could see the moons going around, and you're like, see, we're not the center of the universe. And the astronomers, the philosophers of the time, wouldn't even look through the telescope. I am being silenced, just like Galileo. And it's very funny, because it's like, well, okay, Galileo was silenced by the church. He was put on house arrest, but he still wrote his papers, and people still thought of him as an eminent scientist. And
Oh, bullshit. Okay, so you just... What do you mean he still wrote his papers? No, he didn't. He conceded. He said, okay, I'll shut up. All right, and that's what he did. He shut the fuck up.
I still read his work. If anything, they were refusing to look through the telescope because, like, the Catholic Church was like, if you look through that telescope, we will torture you. It's the Inquisition. Be scared of us. Right? If Galileo was silenced by the physics establishment, wouldn't we not know who he was? And they do the same thing with Einstein, and it's like...
Well, that's because Galileo was already famous as a physicist, so he had already gained great notoriety. I mean, he had a permanent job. I mean, he was well established as a scientist. So they shut up a guy who was well established. What if Galileo is just starting? What if he hadn't had an opportunity to work at a great institution and nobody was reading his stuff because nobody could afford to publish it? What if he was a Fadio? Okay, the guy who came up with the particle idea. You know, and then some other guy has to take his notes after he's dead and republish them at his expense. You know, and it's never a fair fight. I mean, what a pile of shit. Oh, these people are just so evil. Like it's a fair fight. The dissidents it's a perfectly fair fight. They have just as many opportunities to talk about their physics on media as your arguments. Their arguments get just as much airtime, just as much time for somebody to say, yes, I think that's a good argument. You're just so unfair. You're saying you won a fair fight. You didn't win any fair fight. And neither did Einstein. Do you think Einstein won a fair fight by saying, the Eddington experiment, getting a New York Times headline saying Einstein proven right? Do you really think so? When the guy who did the experiment conceded the data is 10% of what he's expecting, and he says right in his own journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. You're telling me that's good science. Well, obviously you don't have a very good definition of good science. Obviously you're pretty fucking stupid, if not ignorant. You're a jerk if you're not ignorant.
Yeah, I remember how everyone hates the work Einstein did. He definitely wasn't considered the most famous, important physicist during his lifetime. Okay.
I mean, what you're seriously you are ignorant of the fact that Einstein was censured? That people did dismiss him, that they started just joking about how he smelled and how he looked and how he showed up for a lecture, that he was totally being dissed because he wasn't part of your fucking quantum world. He didn't buy your entanglement crap. And he paid a substantial price for it in terms of where he got to do what he did and where he got to make his arguments. It's a real fact.
Okay. The last thing is just that they're not physics theories. Crackpots, they're not trained in physics. They don't know how physics theories work. They don't know how to, like...
It's just such a joke. I mean, this is so stupid. I mean, to say this about physicists, there's physicists who don't believe in your physics. You know, they went to school, they're physicists, they're trained in physics. I mean, it's just such a lie to sit there and say, and then what's the magic? You're telling me that Professor Lewin drawing the picture, that somebody else isn't allowed to draw the magical picture on the magical blackboard and to include some other factor, like they can't point out that, well, the gravity inside an object is different than the gravity outside the object. They can't. Yeah, they can. They can make all those arguments. I mean, you're just so you're pathetic. This is such an obnoxious argument. Ugh.
Do the math, to build the background, to respond to other people's works. They just don't have the training to do that. So their work will never be accepted by the physics community because it's just not physics. And you might ask, how could someone who's trained...
Yeah, it's not physics because it's not unevidenced fables. It's not dogma. So anybody, that's all you have is unevidenced dogma. All right, you're a little cult, a little club of jackasses who have all jumped on some retarded woo wagon, and you're going to tell us all what we must believe to gain your respect. Well, fuck your respect. You don't have mine. That's for damn sure. And I hope the future does appropriately with your reputation. Pisses on it.
Trained as a physicist and works as a physicist be a crackpot. How could they fall for point 4 here? In order for me to show you that, I need to talk about 2 physicists, and we will set the scale. And I promise after that, we will do the aliens. So the first physicist I'm going to talk about is Francis Perry, who was a nuclear physicist working at Oak Ridge National Lab, which is a very prestigious position. His work was great, people liked him, he was great at his job, and he started getting interested in Bell's theorem. Now, if you know about crackpots, your little crack...
Yes, that's right. Bell's theorem is a big pile of hype, big pile of nothing. Some notion that I can prove that it's impossible to flip 43 million heads in a row. Yeah, it probably is impossible.
Crackpot red flags should be going off because crackpots are also very interested in Bell's theorem. I am not going to spend the next 30 minutes trying to explain Bell's theorem poorly. I'm going to give the kindergarten explanation in 2 minutes, okay? A result of quantum mechanics is that 2 events can be very far apart. They can happen simultaneously, and it's as if they know about each other. There was no time for data to be communicated. It would have to have traveled faster than the speed of light, so it was not communicated, but somehow they know about each other, which means that physics is non-local. And people don't like that because
people don't like that.
It's not intuitive.
Just point out that Einstein didn't like that. I mean, he called it what it is. Nonsense, garbage, rubbish. It's silly. What the fuck are you doing? This isn't physics anymore. This is some sort of religion, okay? This doesn't have anything to do with reality. Oh, it's pathetic. You don't have enough hard evidence for this conclusion. All right, so it's not like they have some hard evidence of this shit. They have a convoluted shit fucking experiment where they're spinning a mirror, right? Spinning a mirror incredibly fast and then hitting photons into it and then saying, I saw the photon over here. And then a millisecond later, I saw the same photon over here. I mean, it's nonsense bullshit. And the guy who did the experiment, Aspect, he patented his little mirror and wouldn't let anybody else use it.
It's hard to deal with. So Bell's theorem uses that result of quantum mechanics, and from that, people have made a bunch of experiments that all agree with quantum mechanics. I feel like anybody who works in QM is like, is that how we're doing it? But that's my explanation. I'm sure there's a better YouTube video somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. And all rubbish, right. And Einstein, Bogolsky, and whoever, they made a reasoned argument about how this can't really be true. Okay, that entanglement is a nonsense idea. And Bohr countered it with a piece of rubbish argument so convoluted that people couldn't even tell that the pages were in the wrong order.
Go learn about Bell's theorem. That's not what's important. What's important is that is a big thing in physics, and crackpots are so excited to disprove or cancel Bell's theorem, because if you were to do that, if you were to somehow prove that physics was local...
Okay, so if I just prove that the double slit experiment doesn't involve any kind of superposition or interference, that is, no photon bangs into another photon and changes where it's going or any of that crap, then I've undone all of that, right? So I've proven that you don't need any of this entanglement shit, right? I've destroyed the foundation of it. Now, the idea that I have to believe that your convoluted experiment where you say, okay, I'm going to send a photon into a crystal. The crystal is going to produce two lower energy photons with opposite polarization. I'm going to send those into another set of mirrors. And, and then I'm going to take those and bounce them into something and then try to make them interfere with each other. And again, I'm going to argue I can defeat the idea that any of these photons ever do anything called interfering. The radar experiment proves it. You put the two radar dishes on opposite pointing towards each other, put the target in between, and you get the same on-off pattern, all right, the same interference pattern, but the two signals never interact.
And you came up with an experiment that would do that, that would explain all these results, you would immediately be in like the upper echelon of like the famous, the best, the most best physicists in the world, which is the goal of crackpots. But Francis...
So again, another lie, right? The goal of crackpots is they're seeing something that doesn't look like what you're saying it is, okay? They don't see what you see. That's as simple as it is. They don't see what you're seeing, okay? I don't see your God, okay? You're saying Jesus exists. You have no evidence that Jesus exists, and you're saying I must believe Jesus exists. Or I'm going to ridicule and demean you as a human being. I'm going to insult your intelligence, do all of this shit because you don't believe my Jesus theory. That's all you're doing.
Perry is working on this in a time when Bell's theorem is relatively new. So when he tells his colleagues, his friends, his co-workers, like, hey, I'm thinking about Bell's theorem, they're like, oh, I'm excited to see your paper. I'm excited to see what you do with it. Because if someone is going to make progress on Bell's theorem and prove that while the experiments are correct, somehow physics is still local, people would be very excited. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be a physicist. Francis Perry is a physicist. They're excited to see his work.
Oh, whatever. I mean, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be a physicist. What a joke. I mean, like, if physicists were, worth anything, they would have already done it. They would have done the freaking experiment and figured out whether 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same as 1 pound dropped 4 feet. And you can't even get that job done. And certainly doing the Eddington experiment from space, you've only had 50 years. It takes 5 minutes. It's 400 times better resolution. There's no reasonable explanation stating why you wouldn't do it. And it hasn't been done. It's a 25-cent experiment. It doesn't cost billions of dollars. Why hasn't it been done? Do you have an explanation why it hasn't been done? It's cheap as shit, easy as fuck, and it hasn't been done. Why? What's the explanation? Can you answer the question? No, you won't answer the fucking question. Fucking weasels. God damn it. Hate this planet.
The time comes for like his yearly talk at the lab, where you give a talk and you say, here's what I've been working on, here's why you've been paying me. And he gives a talk about his work on Bell's theorem. And the audience is like, uh-oh. Because it's nonsensical. He doesn't really have a theory. He's trying to explain like in words. Like he doesn't have the math, which is checking number.
Okay, so why don't you read the Bohr response to the Einstein, Pulaski, and whatever argument. So why don't you read it and explain how it's a totally coherent defeat of Einstein's argument. Oh, that's right. You won't do that.
And it's just, it's obvious that this is going nowhere. So the lab approaches him and they're like, listen, we like you. You're great at your job. We would like you to go back to working on your other stuff because this is going nowhere. But Francis Perry really, really believes that he has cracked it. And he can't not do it because if he were to succeed, it would be the most important thing to come out of Oak Ridge National Lab. So he thinks, I will just keep working on this. I will get it published. And once it's through peer review, everyone will see what I'm talking about. And they'll understand.
Right. Einstein did the similar thing. I mean, he just kept arguing that there's a better theory. Didn't quite have it. Okay. I would argue he had pieces of it, but he didn't quite have enough of it. And so he couldn't make a persuasive argument up to his very day he died. So, so what's the moral of the story? I don't think you have one here. The fact is, your physics will fall. It will crumble because it is crap. It's based on so little evidence. It's just a Sasquatch theory. You just keep showing me old cigar pictures of UFOs and saying, see, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. No, the future is going to know it's not a real thing. Laser beams kind of blow the whole idea of waves of light to pieces, and you still haven't even accepted that fact.
So he starts trying to get help from his colleagues. Like, he keeps a list of the people he's approached and what their response was. So he's talking to his coworkers, and they're like, it sounds interesting, but I don't have time to deal with this, which is like a nice way to be like, no. Some coworkers are like, this doesn't make sense to me, but good luck. His wife, who's a professional mathematician, who could obviously see what he was writing and see that it didn't really make sense, he wrote down next to her name that...
So is this some sort of sad, we're going to tell another kind of number, the guy who got the Nobel Prize who was a schizophrenic. So this is what you're going to say? I don't know. Where are you going with this? So the guy had a bit of a perceptual issue, okay, in terms of context and understanding. People are frail. So you're going to make fun of him because he's frail. Oh, okay.
She responded with, I trust you. In a last-ditch effort, he's like, I've got to submit this. So he's submitting it, and he's just getting rejection after rejection, and still after, like, the journal stopped responding. He emails all his colleagues, and he's like, let me give a colloquium. Let me come give a talk. We need to talk about this. And Francis, he starts getting angry that his colleagues aren't answering his calls anymore. They're not listening to him. He doesn't know how to explain, and like eventually they stop answering. They stop responding. The journals stop rejecting him. They just don't respond. The colloquiums never happen. And he's not fired from the lab, but he's asked to retire early, which is very kind. And I learned all this information from an absolutely beautiful tribute article written by Frances Perry's granddaughter. I'll link it below. And she remembers her grandfather as post-retirement, just a brilliant guy constantly working on his theories. So she grew up thinking that her grandfather was going to be a famous physicist. He was working on something important. She grows up to be a science writer, and she thinks, hey, I should get someone to look at these. So she goes and she digs through his documents, which is how we find the list where his wife said, I trust you. And she grabs all the papers, the final copies, and she takes them to physicists, and the physicists are like, this is nothing. This is not a theory, it's crank. So it's not a physics theory. So this is one of...
Okay, so we don't know anything, right? So she doesn't tell us anything about what exactly was the huge flaw in the theory. So, there's nothing we can make any judgment about. I mean, what did he say? Gremlins? Did he actually say the king hobgoblin is causing blah, blah, blah? I mean, what exactly was his argument that it was so obviously incorrect? We don't have any information. So what the hell is this? So she just pretty much, made fun of a person, and we don't get to know whether there was any legitimacy to that at all, whether he was actually mentally ill or whether his physics was in some way maybe over your heads.
The ways you can be a working physicist and become a crackpot. It's just cognitive decline with age is just a fact of life, a devastating fact of life, and at a certain point, some people are no longer going to be able to connect their brain to their mouth. So even if he had this great idea, he could not communicate.
Oh, brother, you just can't get it any worse than you deserve. You just really can't. Oh, what a little punk. There's so much you gain with age, frankly. I mean, there's just so much. The idea that you have so much more to work with, so many more facts, so much more information, that yes, any decline in your capacity is overwhelmed by the enhancement of your perspective. The very fact is, I could quote an old Chief Dan George line, thanks for the blindness that enabled me to see. Okay, because yeah, um, yeah, but whatever. Just talk your shit, turd.
It in a way that would make people understand. And I think this is honestly pretty common in physics. Like, you hear stories about like 90-year-old emeritus professors who,
I mean, look, Sean Carroll comes up with a fucking idiotic idea, this many worlds shit. Okay, it's somebody else's idea, and he just says, "Oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's evade all of the paradoxes we're going to create because we'll just invent this idea that every time a photon interacts with an electron, it creates a new universe." I mean, fuck, and you're ridiculing. I just amazing bullshit. This guy gets to publish books, get interviewed, have talks, do all this shit, and he says something this fucking ridiculous and calls it a science. Oh, I mean, just, you can't get it worse than you deserve, you fuckers.
come in and like no one really understands what they're talking about anymore, but they're toiling away at their big theory, and it's depressing. So this is how you can be a physicist and like turn into a crackpot. It does not discount his earlier work. It does not mean he was not a capable, intelligent person who did great things for physics. That's all true. Death comes for us all.
I mean, it's just, all of this bullshit. It's like, there's Schrodinger disavowed your use of his equation, okay? Just a fact. He didn't like what you were doing, all right? He didn't like any of it, okay? And you're saying his good physics is writing the equation, his bad physics is finding fault with how we interpret it and how we perverted it. And you could say the same thing about the comet Halley, okay? And you could talk about the redshift, and you could say, no, he didn't think the cause was the universe expanding. He didn't fall for your bullshit. You're going to call him a crackpot because he didn't believe what you believe? He didn't jump to the silly conclusions you jump to? Anybody who doesn't jump to your silly conclusions is a crackpot. Oh, fuck you. I mean, it's just this is almost so infantile an argument.
The second physicist I want to talk about is Louis Alvarez. During the war, he worked at Los Alamos making progress in radar and microphone techniques. After he goes back to Berkeley as a professor, he develops a liquid hydrogen.
I mean, Feynman, do you really think we can borrow energy from the future and use it and then put it back into the future bank? Do you really, and he concedes that's just a joke. All right, and everything he did was over this gross oversimplification of every concept. Do you really think there was photon detectors? Do you think any of that crap happened? No, it didn't happen. His silly little vague drawings of the double slit experiment, one of the most critical experiments. He calls it the most decisive experiment in physics, and he can't draw it to save his life accurately.
Bubble chamber. With a huge team, an unprecedentedly large team of graduate students, he takes millions of pictures of particle interactions in the bubble chamber and invents the field of data analysis to study all these interactions and discovers the resonant state of elementary particles, which leads to the entire field of subatomic physics. In 1962, Louis Alvarez goes to visit Egypt. He goes on a tour of the Great Pyramids of Giza. And the guide is like, this giant pyramid in the front is for a pharaoh, and that smaller one in the back there is for his son. He comes up with this idea that the second pyramid must have a bunch of hidden chambers because it's against human nature for a son to not want to outdo his father, which, how was your relationship with your father, Louis Alvarez? What is that? So he's developed a theory on solving the pyramids, which... Okay, so what does he do? Does he write down his crackpot theory? Does he say all Egyptologists are wrong? No. He comes up with an experiment. He contacts Egyptologists in America, and in Egypt he gets in contact with the Egyptian government, and he's like, I want to do muon photography in the chambers of these pyramids. It won't hurt any of the material, but we will be able to, without digging, to make a map to see if there are any hidden rooms. After some time, the Egyptian government approves. They do this technique, they make a map, and they find out that Louis Alvarez is wrong. Does he get angry? No. If you've read this book, they talk about how the pharaoh's son, wanted to build a bigger pyramid, but there was like a shortage of supply, so he couldn't. So it turns out Louis Alvarez was right. The year is 1966. Louis Alvarez is really into the JFK assassination. Now, if you know anything about crackpots, you will know that conspiracy and crackpottery just go hand in hand. So if a physicist is like, I'm investigating the JFK assassination, he's watching the footage of the JFK assassination. And I have to just...
The Zapruder film. Oh dear, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I gotta fix that. I was just gonna mention that Kennedy was killed on my birthday, so it's a subject a little personal in some ways. I mean, it obviously ruined. Obviously adds a pretty sour note to a couple of birthdays for a few years, because the idea is that now your birthday is on this day where everybody's playing this video of a guy getting his head blown off. And so it does have an effect on you. So I'll just say that having a president assassinated on your birthday is a little bit it's gonna cause some electrons and protons to move around in a different way, and your destiny is going to be a little different because of it. So anyway, just throwing that in as a physics argument. That's my theory, that you're going to be affected by that kind of event. All right, so we're back to the year is 1966, I guess.
Louis Alvarez is really into the JFK assassination. Now, if you know anything about crackpots, you will know that conspiracy and crackpottery just go hand in hand. So if a physicist is like, I'm investigating the JFK assassination, red flag. He's watching the footage of the JFK assassination. And I have to describe it. Skip ahead.
Yeah, so I'll agree with you that this should be a filter for for deciding how crackpot somebody is. So I would argue that, yes, you're correct. Because conspiracy theories mean you don't have much intelligence, okay? And conspiracy theory means you really aren't, your brain isn't working right. Because it's so easy to debunk a conspiracy theory with merely the argument that, well, like the guys who are dragging the alien to Area 57, why wouldn't they go to the National Enquirer and get paid $5 million? I mean, there's no way you could keep the secret, right? The secret's worth too much money. You can make too much money, and there's no way you're going to pay somebody $36,000 a year and expect them to keep their mouth shut. So none of it can. You can't do conspiracies. It just doesn't really work. So unless this conspiracy is among three people, there's no point in talking about it. Not really plausible.
If that kind of things bother you, like 30 seconds. So JFK is moving in a car. The FBI says the shooter came from the direction in front of him. And when JFK is shot in the head, his head moved towards where the gunman was. Now, when you watch like movies and stuff, when someone gets shot, they like do that thing where they fall back, right?
Well, the point is he was shot twice. So he was shot in the throat first, all right? And so he was rigid because of that happening first. This. And then his brain was blown to pieces.
So a bunch of conspiracy theorists are like, how can the gunman have been in this direction if he's moving towards the gunman? So he's watching the footage and he's reading the FBI documents. Does he write his own crackpot theory? No. He's Louis Alvarez. He doesn't experiment. He decides this is not a two-body problem. It's not a bullet and a body. It is a bullet and a body and a jet of material that leaves your skull if it is hit by a projectile. So he does an experiment where he puts a melon on a stick. He develops high-speed camera techniques that are still used in the movie industry today for this experiment. And he hits the melon with a projectile. And he shows in photos, we can do a three-body calculation, and we find that, yeah, the melon will move towards where the projectile came from. If your grandparents were like mine and were super into JFK, you probably saw all those documentaries and those movies that came out in the 90s that use this exact same footage, this exact same experimental idea to explain it. That's Louis Alvarez. Is he a crackpot? No, he's just seemingly interested in a lot of stuff and willing to take his physics knowledge, design experiments, and
I really don't understand why this is at all a controversy, frankly. I mean, they caught Oswald. They knew where the bullet came from. What's the argument? It really isn't that complicated. The first bullet goes through his throat. It hits Connolly in the elbow. Okay, it deflects into his leg. I mean, it's all, there's nothing outside the realm of reasonable physics involved. So again, what the hell is all this shit?
enter new fields. Does he just jump in and yell at everyone and say that he's right? No, he seeks out experts. He watches video footage. He learns and he contributes to a new field. So it's 1968. Louis Alvarez is in the running for the Nobel Prize. When you get the Nobel Prize, it's not like a surprise. Like, you're probably on the list, your name's being put around for years, and then once it's happening, your friends, your colleagues, your students will start getting calls for interviews from the Nobel Committee. They want to be assured that the physics they think is Nobel Prize worthy actually is. It's making a huge impact on the field. And they don't want to embarrass themselves by nominating someone who turns out like a James Watson situation. They don't want that. So the students, the colleagues, they're like, yes, his work is amazing. He deserves this prize. He's so great. By the way, Louis Alvarez wins the Nobel Prize in 1968. He's into dinosaurs. Everybody's into dinosaurs. That's fine. A well-deserved prize. In the 70s, he starts going to dig sites. He's looking at like sedimentary layers. Like, you know how there was an extinction event with the dinosaurs. So like you see like layers, like lots of bones, lots of bones, lots of bones. Nope.
Was there any point in this? I mean, Isaac Newton obviously was a bit of a religious kook, okay? And he read the Bible and he thought there was all kinds of hidden numerology in it and all kinds of other crap and secrets that we need to learn and blah, 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 and all. He spent a huge amount of his neural energy on complete nonsense. Okay, that's just a tragedy. Where are you going with this bullshit? Ugh, this is pathetic.
Bones, no bones, like the Great Extinction Event. There was no theory that said this is why the dinosaurs went extinct in the 70s. People were saying like, it's probably like a lot of volcano activity. Maybe there was an ice age, so when they laid the eggs, all the eggs froze and the dinosaurs died. Maybe it had to do with flowers, because dinosaurs as a species are older than flowers. Maybe something caused a disease and all the dinosaurs, like a plague, wiped them out. Nobody knew. Louis Alvarez has an idea. He goes to dig sites. He's looking at the rocks. He's taking rocks, and he goes to a national lab where he knows people, because he's a very famous Nobel Prize winning physicist now, and he's like, I would love for you to look at this rock. So they do neutron activation analysis on this rock. They're looking for iridium, because Louis Alvarez's theory is that maybe it was a giant impact. Maybe a giant asteroid slammed into Earth, bringing a bunch of iridium. By the way, it just vaporized and...
Well, obviously, yeah, and this hole was indicated by the fact that there's a layer of clay, that shouldn't be there. That you have all this rock sediment, and all of a sudden the whole thing stops, and you have this dead layer. And yeah, so, but, whatever. Whether there's, who even knows what, it's like these predictions are always a bit off. Remember Carl Sagan saying, if they set these Iraqi oil fields on, the Kuwaiti oil fields on fire, we're going to end up with a, black winter or whatever. We're going to all freeze to death. Yeah, they all got set on fire and nothing happened.
To the air, the dinosaurs near the impact died in the impact, but the iridium in the air, the clay, the dust, the soil, everything in the air would just cloud the skies and rain down and cover the rocks with iridium. It would be everywhere, and also all the dinosaurs would die. By the way, his son was working with him, Walter Alvarez, who was...
So all the big dinosaurs would die, so that's part of it. right? It's not the small dinosaurs, just the big ones.
Geologist. He was the geologist that discovered, like, in between the layer where there's lots of bones and then no bones, there's a little tiny layer of clay. Now, the smaller, the thinner the layer means the faster it happened. So it seems like
I think they found the layer of clay first, so I don't think you have things in the right order. The clay came first.
something happened very quickly, which led Louis Alvarez to suggest, hey, we could test it for iridium. And this is the plot. It's one of the most beautiful plots in science, in my opinion. So they write up the paper. Louis Alvarez, his son, the chemist, and they're like, here's the theory, here's the evidence, here's the experiment. We think it's a giant impact. They repeat the experiment with a layer of rock from Denmark. The plot's nearly the same. The response from the dinosaur community was like, absolutely not. Like, what are you talking about? If there was an impact large enough to do this much damage, where's the crater? Like, this is silly. They talked about it a lot. It was...
Yeah, so again, this is all her version of it, right? I don't think there was all this hysterical resistance to the idea. And then somebody just has to look at things like the Gulf of Mexico and just kind of wonder, it's kind of round.
added to, like, the list of theories. When you're like, volcanoes, flowers, ice age, maybe an impact. And then Louis Alvarez died in 1988. Did he get angry? Did he yell at dinosaur people? Did he say, I'm Galileo and no one will listen to me? Absolutely not. He was just like, here's my paper. Hundreds of other sites are making the same iridium plots. Seems good to me. And in 1991, the Chicxulub crater was found outside on, like, the edge of Mexico. So this is our scale. You have physicists who work as physicists and through no fault of their own, cognitive decline with age, they are unable to continue their work and, like, fall into crackpottery. It's nothing against them. It's nothing about their previous work. It's a devastating fact of life.
I don't even understand her point here. Does she have a point? I don't think there's a point there. Right? Yeah, no, I don't think there was a point. I didn't get the point. Whatever the point was, I can't find it.
Life. And on the other end, you have physicists who are getting involved in new fields, but they're seeking out experts, and they are coming up with theories that they can test with their physics knowledge, and they're writing papers, but with experts in that field so that it can be taken seriously. See those tiptoeing the line of crackpottery. Like, they're checking off some of these boxes here, but not all of them. So where, if anywhere, does Avi Loeb fall on this scale? Let's talk about the aliens. Let's look at the paper first. So published in 2018, could solar radiation pressure explain Oumuamua's peculiar acceleration? So this is a 5-page paper submitted a year after we observed Oumuamua. And what this paper suggests that instead of cometary outgassing, which we see all the time, perhaps Oumuamua could be accelerated by radiation pressure. However, in order for radiation pressure to accelerate an object, the object has to be very, 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 very thin, like paper, and not very dense. So what Avi Loeb calculates in this paper is how thin and how not very dense Oumuamua would have to be, and whether or not that fits the object.
Okay, so she's talking about this tumbling asteroid, so we're back to that for some reason. And the other factor that's just a reality is that with small objects that aren't spherical, the gravity isn't symmetrical. They're not point particles. They, in fact, do have a difference in their gravity lengthwise versus, looking through it this way is harder than looking through it this way. Okay. So, it does make a difference, frankly. The shape changes its gravity. And I think they found that on some asteroid that was irregularly shaped, that its gravity was different in different locations because it's not spherical.
Observations. So he claims that it can, perhaps possibly, instead of being a cigar, Oumuamua was a pancake. And it's so thin that it can be accelerated with radiation pressure. And then he goes on to show that an object like this should be able to travel through the galaxy, through the interstellar medium, without getting destroyed on impact. Avi Loeb suggests that if this object...
I don't even know what that means. Not destroyed by impact. I don't even know what that means. I don't even buy her theory that something has to be thin to be affected by radiation pressure. If there's uneven pressure, it's going to be affected. Period. All right, so I guess we should note, I think that she's just talking about dead people. So she doesn't really have the courage to talk about somebody who's still alive, apparently. So, all this ragging on dead people who can't fight back is, really kind of lame, frankly.
Is very, very thin and was accelerated by radiation pressure. Then, I should read it. Oumuamua is a light sail floating in interstellar space as debris from an advanced technological equipment. And then he cites a blog post that he wrote. So, there's a jump from perhaps Oumuamua was accelerated by radiation pressure. What would it have to look like? To, it's alien technology, right? Okay, it could have been accelerated by radiation pressure, but the jump from that to alien tech is the jump out of the solar system. What? How did you get there? So obviously this theory is dealing with the biggest things in physics. It's saying...
Yeah, so, couldn't I say the same thing? My standard wouldn't be just aliens, but any physicist who believes there's a God is a fucking moron, okay? It just really is too stupid. So, what's the standard? Can we make that a rule that any physicist who belongs to has any affiliation with any religion, we can put him on the crackpot list too?
Aliens not only exist, but we can see their tech in our solar system. And then you can go ahead and check number 2, because he does not offer any evidence of this. We cannot see Oumuamua. This theory was proposed in 2018, a year after we had observed it. We can't observe it again. Why? Why is it aliens? And that was the general response from the physics community. If we compare this paper to Luis Alvarez's dinosaur paper, Luis Alvarez not only worked with experts outside of his field, he worked with a geologist, he worked with chemists. They came up with a theory, and they came up with an experiment to test that theory, and they did the experiment, and they published the data. If you compare that to Loeb's paper...
And so, if we were to do actually this process of doing these comparisons, okay, so Leibniz just said 4 pounds 1 foot, same as 1 pound 4 feet. Just said it, never did the experiment, never tested, never proved it. All right, then they use pulleys and levers to pretend. Then you could even go to Joule, who's dropping things not at the free fall speed in gravity. He's dropping them slower than the free fall speed, obviously collecting more force, and then claiming that something has more force than it has when it's free falling. So it free falls in 2 seconds, obviously only collects 2 units of 9.8. Obviously, if I make it fall in 4 seconds, I've now collected 4 units of energy. It's just a fact. Too silly. I mean, to make these comparisons, especially when physics hasn't done any of these experiments. So you're comparing this again. This is, this geological story isn't really a physics story. It's a geology story. So you're not even in the same field still. It's really not a physics story.
It's 5 pages. It's not much. It doesn't explain what evidence he has for this theory. It doesn't offer a experiment that we could do on Oumuamua because it's gone. It's just, there's nothing there. By the way.
Okay, so we can't synthesize Oumuamua. So we can't build an object in space and spin it. We can't do something to find out if there would be some recognizable or detectable energy. So that's also bullshit, right? Which, of course, we could do such an experiment, like Copenhagen did. We can try to simulate the circumstances in a much smaller scale and see if there's any correlation.
Avi Loeb writes about dinosaurs too, but no. not to the same scene. On to point 3. Every single astronomer probably responded to this paper as like, okay, sure, but probably not. Probably not aliens. Like, it's probably a cigar-shaped comet and not an extremely thin alien civilization detritus object that somehow got into our solar system. But of course the media sees.
Okay, so and all of the crap that's conventional physics talks about. So I mean, the Dr. Quantum video has 4 or 5 million views in different places. I mean, it must be 40 or 50 or 60 million by now. Who knows the total? Junk. Some guy has a spandex gravitational well. It's got 5 or 6, 7, 8 million views. It's a bullshit. Obviously it's not going to show you how orbits are created. It's not going to show you any of that because there's way too much friction. And the fact is you drop something into gravity and it either crashes or it flies back out again. It doesn't do any of this orbit shit unless there's something to take away its velocity. So it's not even an accurate description of the reality. Yet this is part of science on YouTube. So Veritasium is claiming that electricity travels outside the wire. I mean, bullshit. Electrons don't convey the force. Of course they're the carriers. I mean, it's just such bullshit.
Harvard professor, aliens, and like the dollar signs of like that headline, and the media ran with it. Like, Harvard professor says, aliens, astronomy community debates existence of aliens. And it's like, is it a debate if one person is like, maybe, and everyone else is like, yeah, but probably not? The response of astronomers to this debate in the media was just like, no.
Right, and so she's saying this is a real controversy somewhere, that there was a real question raised somewhere, and there really wasn't. I mean, come on, get real. This wasn't a real subject. This is like saying it's a real subject when the Air Force released the video of the UFO crap, and any trivial analysis, especially the flying duck. I mean, the duck was so obvious it was a fucking bird. I mean, you could see its wings flapping. I mean, for fuck's sake, it's obviously a bird.
No. Loeb's response was angry. He would go on these interviews and be like, the astrophysicists, the astronomers are too conceited about...
To learn, it's really important for us to be modest. That's the first thing that we need to learn.
Their intelligence to even think that aliens exist. How dare they not be hopeful that something like this...
So this is a strange way to do this story. So she's talking about one story of a credible scientist doing credible work, and then we don't even know who this guy really was, right? So we don't know what his previous credentials were. So who knows what kind of nut he was in other areas. I mean, it's a very bad comparison.
Could happen.
We just need to learn from the evidence and revise our notions. And we should be open-minded. So it's not a matter of how many likes an idea has on Twitter.
Astronomers, they're too conservative. They'll never...
Then in academia, I see a lot of conservatism, much less innovation.
...do an exciting idea, and it's just like...
All right, so, and this is in light of Mickey Ikaku, who says all kinds of wacky shit, all right, all over the place. I mean, what? This is just such hypocrisy. It's your physics that gets these people on the news, not somebody else.
Like, well, yeah, we're conservative with what theories we back because we require scientific evidence. That's how science
What a
works.
pile of shit. You don't require any fucking scientific evidence. Again, one of the biggest experiments in history, proving Einstein right, and you haven't repeated it beyond the margin of error from Earth, and you haven't even tried it from fucking space. I mean, it's lame. All these claims that your science is unassailable. What a pile of shit.
Suggest that because we didn't see a comet tail, it's more likely that radiation pressure is the cause of the acceleration. And the jump from that to, so it's more likely that it's aliens, is just what all the astronomers are not agreeing with. Like, most astronomers, at least every single astronomer I've ever had this discussion with, would be like, of course aliens exist. Like, every single star we look at has a bunch of planets around it. There are so many stars. There are so many galaxies with their own stars. With their
Oh, amazing. So this is how ignorant they are. Yet here on planet Earth, a junkyard covered in the elemental pieces, the building blocks of living things. No duplicate neuron, no duplicate of the nucleic cell, and no duplicate of a DNA arrangement. So only one DNA arrangement, even though there's a ton of DNA and RNA and all kinds of shit, only one of them. Only one of them became nucleic. Only one of them becomes a neuron. I mean, this is just such bullshit to sit there and say, oh yeah, there's life all over the universe. What a pile of crap. You don't even know, you have no clue how bizarrely unlikely it all is. No clue at all. You have no good reason to even define some kind of number. There's nothing. There's no number you can conceive that has any scientific credibility in terms of recognizing how preposterous unlikely it is, because it only happened one fucking time, okay, in gazillions and gazillions of permutations. You rolled these Yahtzee dice billions and trillions of times, and yet it only happened once where the 6 landed right on top of a 6.
Own planet. Like, there's no way there's not aliens. Of course there's aliens. The scientific method comes in when it's like, but we need evidence of aliens. He was also claiming that astronomers are so conservative, they won't even think about aliens. They won't even think about how we could observe aliens. What alien civilization...
Yeah, what you would believe. That's right. So Hawking says if the aliens existed, they would be stupid enough to eat us. That they'd go all the way across space and use their warp drive or whatever the fuck they're using just to go eat dinner. I mean, god damn, how stupid do you have to be? I mean, what a silly piece of speculation. No psychology would be that crazy. I mean, even crazy people wouldn't do that.
Civilizations would look like, what alien technology would look like. And it's just like, bro, like, the NASA program SETI has existed since 1985, where they specifically looked for signals from alien civilizations. The field of exoplanet science, they talk about all the time, like, what would, like...
Yeah, they talk about it all the time, like the biggest magical thing. All you need is water, and all of a sudden life just poofs. Oh, pathetic. It just poofs. Yeah. We can't make one, but yeah, the planet is smart enough. It can do it. We have all this knowledge, and we know basically so much about how the goddamn stuff works, and we still can't make one.
The spectra of a atmosphere of an exoplanet with alien civilizations look like? How could we make a definitive statement on, like, this signal is due to alien technology and definitely not any natural processes? They talk about that all the time. You are suggesting that you're the first one to have this discussion and everyone's just angry about it because they're too conservative. Without comment.
Okay, so it really doesn't... What she's arguing is almost like another kind of hypocrisy and duplicity. She's conceding that most of her clan believe aliens do exist, so why wouldn't you think, I was saying the universe is really old, that there would be civilizations way ahead of us, that, you know, alien technology could be affecting, you know, these probes would, you know, be disguised as rocks? Yeah, why not? So yeah, if you're going to believe that crap. Anyway.
I will submit a video of Avi Loeb at a meeting with some people from SETI.
So Avi, I get a little bit pissed off when you throw the entire scientific culture under the bus, because some of us have been thinking about and building instruments to find anomalies for a very long time. And I think that when we say that if we ever are going to announce such a detection that we require extraordinary evidence. We're doing that as a way of...
Why don't you just expect ordinary evidence? So again, this is just such another joke, right? We don't need extraordinary evidence that light is twice as bent. Just give us some ordinary evidence, okay? Just repeat that stupid Eddington experiment from the 400 better resolution in space. All right? What, it's extraordinary evidence for you to drop 4 pounds 1 foot and drop 1 pound 4 feet and prove this distance thing matters and the time thing doesn't? Let's forget about time in gravity and just pay attention to distance in gravity. And again, what physicist could possibly defend the idea that if I go into something gravitational with a high speed, I go into it with 500 miles an hour, that somehow I'm going to be affected by the same amount of gravity over that distance? Because of course I'm not. The gravity is going to have almost zero influence on me because I'm going to go through it so fucking fast. I'm not going to gain any velocity. I'll gain 9.8 meters of velocity and that's it. I traveled 100 miles and I'm going to gain just 1 unit of time because it's only going to be 1 second to do that 100 miles. What physicist doesn't know that's the goddamn truth? I mean, god damn, they're just so full of shit. God, I just hate this planet.
Differentiating ourselves from the pseudoscience that is so much a part of popular culture.
We need extraordinary evidence and then step on the grass and not allow it to grow, which is currently the case. We need extraordinary evidence, but anyone that mentions this possibility is ridiculed by some blogger that doesn't even write a single paper in a decade. That makes no sense whatsoever. This blogger should first practice science.
Well, some of us do.
No, let me finish. How dare people make statements about scientists and a factor of 100 more people working on it, not at the SETI Institute, but everywhere, in every university, this becoming a mainstream subject, just like string theory is. Why should we fund searches for dark matter and not for technological civilizations as part of the mainstream? That's my argument. And I find it really surprising that I get opposition from you to that notion.
Yeah, well, whatever. So he's obviously really, something. He's got an alien bug up his butt. Yeah, so, what can you say about that, okay? He's basically saying, look, maybe we should look for bottles in the ocean, with notes from the people on the other side of the ocean, with the expectation that they can write better than we can, and they're going to send us a really important message. But if you assume the opposite, that the other civilizations aren't as mature as yours, then yes, you're not going to expect to see any bottles in the ocean with notes in them. It doesn't mean there aren't any people out there. It just means that, they haven't gotten as far as we did.
Actually, I said it 40 years ago, you're saying it now, I want credit for that, you don't get credit. We are trying to promote a common cause. And you're arguing with me about credit. I just don't understand it.
Do you know who he's yelling at? It's Jill Tarter. Jill Tarter, you might not know her, but you do know her. She's the director, or she was.
Yeah, who cares? The silliest science project in the history of mankind, based on just idiotic notions that somehow we can receive their TV signals. Give it up. Too ridiculous.
The director of SETI for.
I mean, what would be the point, right? We know there's nobody local, so even if we heard a piece of noise that sounded like something from another civilization, what would we do with the information? We have no way to communicate. We have no way to say anything or to do a damn thing. Nothing. There's nothing we can do. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely zero anything to do about it. And we would just wonder, well, why didn't they send a probe here? Why didn't they hear our noise and send a probe? Why haven't they sent probes, let's just say?
Many decades. She's a radio astronomer. Her whole...
So I guess that would be the only thing you would figure out, right? Is that, let's say if we knew there was certainly something out there that had intelligence because it was sending some sort of language thing or something. So we got some sort of message, some sort of TV show, whatever. So what would our response be? Okay, so now we've confirmed that there's other thinking beings that have evolved out of the matter. The matter made thinking devices. All right, and and how rational are they in terms of what was their evolution? I mean, were they evolved from a Tyrannosaurus, or were they evolved from a plant, or what did they evolve out of? How did they function? Were they predators? Were they prey? All these things would have to be understood, and that they had this capacity to reason and do technology. Well, once you can do that, you can figure out lots of things. But maybe they're not sentient. There's no sensation. They're just smart. But then they'd figure out that there's no point in being smart. There's no point in living. There's no point in being a thinking machine. There's no point in wasting the electricity. But no, if we did know they existed, then what would we do? Well, I guess the rational thing to do is we'd make a lot of tiny little probes and just send them out into space, saying we're here. And guess what? Doesn't mean a damn thing. It's, again, useless, pointless. You're never visiting each other. You're never going to have a live conversation. No point.
Career is based on looking for exotic signals in the galaxy. Anything we could attribute to alien civilization. She specifically thinks about every day, what would alien technology send us? What would that message look like? What would it be? Ellie Arroway, the hero of the movie Contact, is specifically based on Jill Tarter. And Avi Loeb is yelling at her like she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like she's too conservative. Like no one has even thought to think about alien civilizations like Avi Loeb. How dare she? On to number 4.
Oh, well, frankly, it is all just kind of ridiculous, the whole Drake equation. Carl Sagan is the one who made this a viable idea in the first place. Like somebody should pay any attention to this nonsense too. So to his discredit, it's rather thin thinking, frankly. And it just denies everything we know about evolution, which is I could really go through the list of all the events that are single events that only happened one time. And if that one thing didn't happen, nothing. I mean, there's no brains on Earth if the one neuron wasn't created. And it's only one neuron. All the neurons that do thinking can all be traced to one fucking event. And it only happened one time. Only one physical cell with a certain DNA is the only one that ever happened. Out of all the cells on Earth, only one of them mutated into a neuron. Only one. Right there, you're in big trouble. You're saying the whole history of life on Earth, and what would it be without that one neuron? Without that neuron happening, you're back to just flatworms all over the place. I mean, come on, people, grow a brain. yeah, in a dish.
Or there's a joke in physics graduate school where, how to explain this? You write a paper, like a normal paper. Like I would write a paper that like, here's dark matter dynamics in the galaxy. And then in like the conclusion, you could write, obviously, alien civilization. Or I could write, like, of course, this requires dark matter to be.
Right, why don't you say dark matter, or say many worlds, or say multiverses, or say singularities, or say wormhole, or say any of the crap you people spew. Antimatter, antiparticle, positroni, neutrino, what do they call it? What do they call when they collide with each other? Damn it. Shit, I can't remember the word for when they pervert, two of them combine and they become matter. I mean, just too silly.
Behave as we expect with gravity. That says nothing, right? It's a nonsense statement to add. But in future, I can be like, I'm going to cite that paper, Collier 2022, every time I talk about how dark matter might be something else. And I'll encourage others to be like, oh, you should cite my paper where I talk about how dark matter might not obey gravity. In future, someone will do a big experiment with a big collaboration. They'll solve gravity, and I will be like, I predicted this in Collier 2022, where I said it might not behave the same way. Right? That counts. Right? And it's a joke, because, like, Who's going to fall for that? They could just read the paper and be like, you just wrote a single sentence. But what if you're from Harvard?
Well, what do you want to talk about Tesla's patents? I mean, these vague ideas that anybody could have said and written the same patent and said, yeah, I think that's possible. Like, he didn't invent anything, any idea, okay, that 400,000 other scientists didn't think was reasonable. But no, none of them thought of, well, I should patent the idea that round wheels work better. I mean, too silly.
And what if you just write 30 to 50 5-page papers per year on completely disparate topics, from like galactic kites to CMB stuff to aliens on Enceladus?
To bent space being a 5-page paper, relativity. Yeah, right.
And you just hope that something sticks. Maybe every time you have a conversation with any other physicist, you'll just be like, oh, you should read my 2014 paper about that. And then when that physicist goes to look, it's just like 3 pages in a single plot. Like, if you look at Avi Loeb's...
Okay, so again, how much do I have to pay you to play one of my 5-minute videos debunking kinetic energy? Okay, I got like 13 of them, different arguments about levers and pulleys and gears, and dropping round objects into clay and rolling things on flat surfaces, and all kinds of arguments about how it's complete nonsense. I mean, gravity, how, it's about time, not distance. All of those arguments. How much do I have to pay you to fucking debunk a 5-minute video?
Yes, Paige. He's releasing 3 to 5 papers per month on wildly different things, which is suspicious because a physics paper, an academically peer-reviewed paper, is supposed to advance the knowledge of a topic. So
what is the meaning of peer review in the current context? There's all the journals couldn't make any money. Okay, they're all dead. Okay, there's no such thing as Nature magazine anymore. There's no such thing as any place where we'll have a standard for what we publish. What is the standard anymore? They're all not economically viable. They don't have any structure. So what the fuck is you're talking about? What the hell is a peer-reviewed journal anymore in this context? Some institution paid for by Harvard or paid for by some institution? Who's financing it? Who's financing this, peer-reviewed journal?
You spend time, like, you read up on the history, you develop an experiment or an observational technique, and you write it up with, like, plots and evidence, and you write conclusions with...
So again, no evidence. So again, what's the plot? I mean, there's lots of evidence, frankly. There's lots of counter evidence against Eddington. Not only his own journal, where he basically calls the experiment a complete failure, but the fact that on hindsight, all of a sudden they made a couple of the glass slides disappear. And there's all kinds of questions about, all kinds of negotiations between the two teams over, what they're really seeing and what they didn't see, and blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole bunch of evidence that this is a shittier experiment than the evidence even indicates, the evidence they bothered to look for. It's a shitty experiment, and yet it's still held up as an argument in your physics. And again, you still haven't dropped 4 pounds from 1 foot.
Predictions and exciting things, right? How do you have the time to do that 3 to 5 to 10 times per month? And
so that's an easy enough critique, right? That there's got to be superficial arguments because nobody could do a complete redefinition of a subject 5 times in 1 week. Unless they've done 10 years of work and now they're going to publish it all at once. I mean, Einstein published all at once, but I mean, he obviously came to these conclusions over a number of years. I mean, he didn't have a miracle year. It was only that 1 year he published, and before that he just had ideas, okay? And then he decided to publish the ideas. So the ideas were years in the making.
Trick is that you don't. I call these homework problem papers because like sometimes you'll go to a conference and you will have a discussion around coffee that like inspires one of the people. So you'll see like a real academic paper written, and then in the acknowledgments they're like, this work was inspired in Aspen in 2015 with conversation with these 3 people. You know, Avi Loeb is writing up the conversation, like the back of the envelope calculation, just like the short, tiny, like the start of a project. And honestly, they read like actual homework papers. Like if he has his big group.
So again, we could just go back to critiquing Einstein. Einstein's original papers were kind of thin, okay? It's a pretty thin arguments.
And he's like, I'm assigning this problem. What would the shape and density of a Oumuamua have to be if it was accelerated by radiation pressure based on the observed acceleration? Go. And then he just picks the best one and they write the paper and publish it. Like, I don't understand how it's possible to publish this many papers. And I know, I don't know, I feel very strongly that if I were to take one of these papers and plagiarism checkers didn't exist and submit it, I would be desk rejected. They would be like, this does not constitute paper, please do more work on this topic, and resubmit it, right? Or it would get to the review stage and the reviewer would be like, this is not interesting or not.
Oh, duh. So again, so you're just pointing out the obvious. Look, Veritasium, as much as I hate the credit, he's an asshole. I mean, he basically made this argument that you can't trust what gets through the editors because 50% of it is crap. And just a fact. And it really is just a prestige thing. If I'm Michio Akaku, then they're going to read my paper completely different if I'm not. So yeah, you already know it's not a credible system. Your system of judging crackpot bullshit, thin nonsense from credible physics is already celebrity driven. You're already failed. You're dismally failed. If somebody else besides deGrasse Tyson had suggested Pluto's not a planet, everybody would just ignored him. Come on, he's nobody. He's not Carl Sagan's best friend.
Novel, or it doesn't do enough work. It's inconsequential. It doesn't do anything. So it's not worthy of publication. But if you're from Harvard, the trick is you have to be famous to get a homework problem paper published. Here's another example of one from Ed Witten. Ed Witten is a very famous physicist. This paper concerns...
All right, so you're just conceding the argument. You're conceding your own jury inside of your own system to decide what's a good argument to put at trial is broken. That you can't even figure out that, oh yeah, the lawyer shouldn't just draw a picture of a gun. Yeah, he should actually have a gun,
Planet 9. Do I have to explain Planet 9? Okay. In the outer solar systems, beyond Pluto, there are these bodies that are inclined to the plane of the galaxy. So this could be due to disk dynamics, or there is a theory that very far outside Pluto, there is a highly inclined planet that is pulling some stuff up. Okay, that's called Planet 9. Someone was like, well, if it's Planet 9, how come we haven't seen it? And obviously it's because planets are relatively small on the scale of a galaxy, so it would be hard to see. It's also very far from the sun, so it's not going to be reflecting a lot of light.
There you go. That's the big one. It's not going to be reflecting any fucking light.
But a paper suggested, maybe it's a black hole. We can't see it because it's a black hole. It's still massive. It's still pulling up bodies, but we can't see it because it's a black hole, which, great. Okay.
Well, it wouldn't be massive, would it? I mean, wouldn't it be a small black hole if it's only pulling as much as a planet would pull? So that doesn't even make any sense. It's either pulling like a planet would pull or it's pulling like a sun would pull. Can't have it both ways.
This paper by Ed Witten, again, it's a very short 3-page paper. It's a homework problem paper. And he's like, well, if it's a black hole, we couldn't see it. So we would have to look for it with gravity. So we could send some probes to measure the shifting gravity due to the black hole. here's a calculation of how many probes we would have to send. And this got published. Like, are you just writing up any idea you have? Like, yeah, if it was a black hole, we couldn't see it. Yeah, we would have to look with gravity. Great. I may just be salty because, like, this has been cited more times than most of my papers. And I'm not saying papers have to be long. I'm just saying the letter, the short paper, is usually reserved.
I wonder who would cite any of these papers, frankly. So, yeah, so now you're saying you have papers. Where would they get cited anyway? Who could care about this minutia? I mean, it really is minutia. It's just such bullshit, such nonsense. It doesn't have anything to do with real physics. Write a paper about something real, like proving 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same energy as 1 pound dropped 4 feet. Prove that.
For exciting discoveries. Like, you write the letter and you're like, guys, amazing. Papers following up. Like Robert Work.
I mean, there's no papers on any of this kinetic energy stuff. So let's just understand. There's absolutely zero papers that prove that a car going 50 miles an hour creates half the, 1/4 of the damage of a car going 100 miles an hour. Not a single paper. There's no paper proving any of this crap. No paper proving that when a ballistic pendulum absorbs a bullet, that there's really a whole bunch of heat created. There's joules of energy that somewhere goes somewhere else, and it's not caused by the momentum, because you conserve all the momentum and you lose all the kinetic energy. And there's no paper explaining where the extra energy is, doing any experiment, testing it to see how hot the pendulum got, to see if there's 5,000 joules of energy in the pendulum. Nothing. Zero. You have no papers on any of these elemental contentions you make. No papers. Nothing. Zero.
Who discovered Oumuamua could have written a letter, and everyone would have been like, holy crap, this is amazing, right? But that's not what these homework problem papers are. Like, they don't, like, yeah, they're not.
I mean, it is sort of amazing. Like, even the Einstein ring. I mean, Einstein points out that, well, the gravity doesn't work that way, right? So you're not going to see an Einstein ring because the photons coming behind another planet and coming out, and it has to be perfect. The gravity is going to bend the light too much on the inside and too little going on the outside, so it's not going to create. It's just one tiny sliver of photons that will be the right amount of bending, and any photon that's a little to the left, fuck it, you're not going to see it. Any photon's a little bit to the right, fuck it, you're not going to see it. So there ain't going to be enough light. You're not going to see an Einstein ring. Your physics says, oh yeah, it happens all the time. Here's a picture of one. Oh yeah, it's not round, it's not symmetrical. Doesn't make any sense that it could possibly be an optical lensed image because it's got no symmetry at all. It's this funky smoke ring looking ring. It looks like a smoke ring. It looks like a ring you get after an explosion where, it's a little bit uneven. It's not perfectly symmetrical.
Wrong? They're not bad physics. It's just inconsequential and not interesting. Like, I immediately contrast these 3 to 5 page papers about various topics that don't really say anything to the EPR paper, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paper, which is a 4-page paper.
Right, that just mocks the fuck out of quantum mechanics. Well, what do you think? You think what do you think they're entangled? Do you actually think they can read each other's minds? And the answer, yes. So it's basically the Schrodinger cat argument. And it's basically saying, look, your silly physics leads to this preposterous conclusion that photons are entangled by some mechanism that moves instantaneously. They have instantaneous knowledge of each other's positions. It's not possible. They can't know instantaneously where they are and where everything else is. It breaks everything we know about how forces and physics works. And so are you going to give us the Bohr's a response to the Podolsky paper, the one that nobody can understand, the one that physicists concede is incomprehensible? I wonder if she will.
that describes a thought experiment. Just a thought experiment about quantum mechanics. The result of this paper was huge. Like, people received...
All of Einstein's papers involve thought experiments. I don't know which one doesn't have a thought experiment in it. I mean, the Brownian motion one, I have to think for a while. But it's basically a deduction about the fact that, well, there must be electrons and protons because that's why atoms are moving. I mean, so it's a deduction. So it's a thought experiment in the sense he doesn't prove their existence, but he says what else could account for it.
Their copies in the mail, because it's the 30s or whatever. Like, they're all reading the paper. Like, the physics departments across the world are just ignited with discussion and passion, and, like, we have to design experiments. It deals with quantum mechanics. It led to Bell's theorem. I'm like a really good storyteller. It's all coming around. It led to Bell's theorem. It led to tests of quantum mechanics. That is what a short paper is supposed to do. A short paper is supposed to be like, hey, look at this idea.
So this is the irony. It's a paper mocking it. And she's talking about how it's the foundation of our brilliant theory, when it's a paper mocking it. Amazing. Amazing bullshit.
It's amazing.
I have more than 800 papers that I published and 8 books. Wrote nearly 1,000 scientific papers, published 8 books.
I just don't think writing 800 articles is the flex Avi Loeb thinks it is.
Well, I think that's pretty fucking impressive that he was able to get all of this gobbledygook, whatever the fuck it is, actually published. So if you don't think that's kind of, wow, how the fuck did he do that? I mean, who the hell, what kind of dirt does he have on the editors, right? I mean, he must have some incredible, like he slept with all their wives or something. What the fuck did happen that he's able to publish all these papers successfully?
When so many of them are these brief little thought experiments. Like, what if the sign wasn't a binary? What if this moon around Mars had life on it?
So why don't you do it? I'm just saying, if I was a physicist, I know this does add to your credibility when you got published papers. So, I mean, it's a pretty good thing to be able to say that, look, I've been published 1,000 times. I've come up with 1,000 ideas that editors didn't throw in the garbage. I mean, that's pretty fucking impressive that he got away with that. And here you are, ridicule that. And that's pretty impressive. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously I think your editors are retards, so of course they fall for this crap. They wouldn't know physics from, whatever, religion, frankly. There might as well just be the Inquisition. I mean, they want a Jesus story. They want some kind of wooey crap. So the wooier the crap, the more likely it is to get published. Woo sells. It is funny to just think about what you could possibly get published. Obviously, I think a physicist could write a rational paper basically proving the impossibility of a self-generating intelligence. That no intelligence could poof out of matter. Can't just poof. It has to evolve. There's no other way for it to acquire the structure or the order without some process, some cause and effect process, some evolution. And just make the argument that, well, how a God can't be self-creating. It's just not possible. So it had to be made by something, if there was such a thing. But no, that won't get published because, no, that's an argument against magic.
What if galactic kites? Like, it reads like one of those Randall Munro books, which are good.
So we'll find one of her papers and read it and see what it reads like, which will be a big pile of mush. Convoluted mush.
But you're not really advancing science. Has anybody read one of the 120-ish papers that Avi Loeb has written in the past few years and been like, wow, I'm gonna pursue this topic? Like, they're almost like shit posts. Like, he'll publish like research notes in fields that are far from his own and be like, here's my thoughts on Planet 9. Here's my thoughts on alien civilizations. And The only citations are people responding like he doesn't really understand what's going on in the field. And then Avi Loeb will publish a response to the response. It's like, well, actually, Avi Loeb knows that this is a controversial approach to science. He has mentioned that his postdocs have asked him about this. I will read it to you. I tell my own postdocs that accessible short insights tend to stimulate the field, encouraging follow-up work by the scientific community. I urge them to believe, as I do, that brief, intellectual, rich work will improve their job prospects, and I tell them that their ability to explain research clearly depends on their describing only those things that they understand and admitting those things that they do not. But they inevitably respond, that's easy for you to say, you're the chair of the Harvard Astronomy Department. And it's just like, I can't believe that he published that story. Like, his postdocs, who are very smart because they're at Harvard, they're like, I don't think this is complex enough to be a paper. I don't think this is an interesting result. I don't think we have researched this topic enough to make the statements we want to say. And Avi Loeb's like,
Yeah, well, and that's not what he's saying, though. What he's basically saying is that you stir the pot and then all kinds of stuff can come out of garbage. So somebody could just suggest relativity 300 years ago, and it's worth having a conversation about. But I would say it was also defeatable, and the arguments could be made. So why wouldn't you say that, yeah, you go ahead and make an argument, and it's always good to test. Testing is good. Test the cranky ideas, the far-fetched ideas, and then maybe one of them you scratch it a little bit and you could make it work. So I could argue that, okay, people superficially scratched the idea of particle gravity, but they only did it superficially, right? So the argument could be made is they said, okay, it creates drag, so it can't be possible because anything moving in space would be dragged to a halt. Well, then somebody can counter-argue and say, well, electrons and protons are dragged to a halt. They can't. You can't shoot them to the moon. They can't get there. Okay, so even when I'm in a pretty hard vacuum, I can't get a proton or an electron to go across space and land somewhere. I can't make a true electron gun that'll keep going. It just runs out of fuel. So electrons and protons are dragged to a halt. That's why we don't get any cosmic rays that are in any other form. I mean, cosmic energy, let's call it. Helium nuclei. You have to have a big thing to keep moving. Little things can't. The elemental bits are dragged to a halt, and somehow, when they're in arrangements, electron, proton, electron, for example, then they can keep going. So I mean, the junk idea gets dismissed, but the dismissal is so thin, and so. Well, maybe you need to probe that dismissal. Maybe you jump to a conclusion too quickly because maybe there is some evidence that drag is a real thing. And that there's some way that a wrench in space I throw, the big wrench can keep going, but the little proton can't.
Like, we're stimulating the community. We're inspiring. But has anyone followed up on these projects? Has he inspired? And also...
So just to understand, there's pretty clear evidence, right? That, we can see the space pretty clearly, it's coming in. And the fact is that, something supernovas, you got to realize that, there's photons flying off. There's got to be a bunch of high-energy electrons and high-energy protons flying out. But none of them get here. And it's only bigger chunks that get here, that successfully navigate the space. So, there's pretty hard evidence that it is in fact true that electrons and protons aren't very good at traveling distance in space, that something steals their energy.
Why does he get to be the inspiration? Why is Avi Loeb the inspiration of the field of physics? Because usually you inspire people in the introduction of your paper. You write an academic journal article and you introduce the very exciting problem you are going to solve. You put the background. You say, why is this problem important? Here is what I'm going to do. And then through simulation and observation and experiment and analysis.
And so much of it has been under-argued. None of this has been really argued. All these little details. The idea of LIGO, that, you can convert matter into bent space. None of this stuff has been argued. Even accelerator, the linear accelerator. The fact is, okay, I have an electron gun. I shoot the electron across a high voltage of a couple of million volts. I get it moving pretty quickly. But the fact is that the target is going to see a photon the same way it's going to see the electron. The photon is going to cause the plate to change its charge also. So other energy I'm hitting the target with is going to create the same effect. And then I can't be fooled because some energy got there at the speed of light. Well, when did the bulk of the energy get there is the question. So it's like an electric current. The current lags the voltage. The first photon gets there. The first electron gets to the end of the wire very fast. But the rest of the horses are way behind. These are real subjects.
Analysis. You show your results and you excite the audience with an answer. Avi Loeb just writes the introduction and publishes that 3 to 5 page paper and is like, great, someone will finish this for me. Every 3 days, you just want to come up with another topic and spit out whatever idea you can, and then it gets published because you're Harvard and your postdocs are like, uh-oh.
So this is a whole different subject. She's talking about whether physicists should muse the community, whether they should, be a little bit reckless or sloppy and, just try to provoke conversation versus this whole idea of counter theory and being a crackpot, as she put it. So it's hardly, a guy is hardly a crackpot because he says, well, maybe there's a grain of truth in some speculation, and so let's go test the grains. Let's go test it. That's hardly a horrible offense that somebody says, let's test the idea.
Are these going to look bad on my CV? I'm obsessed with this idea that he thinks that these short papers, which are loosely defined as academic research, are inspiration for just the peons like me. I don't get to come up with my own ideas. I should just look at his papers and finish that work. Who gets to decide who gets to be the inspirer of science? Why are you the inspiration?
Right. So this is, again, I could just bring up Tesla again or some other person who, they just play the game. They see a glimmer of something and they write up their patent paper just to make sure they're the first one to say it. And so, that is sort of bullshit. So, maybe the guy's got a real ego problem and, this is how he scores points in life. But again, whose fault is it? Your own science is the only person that's making him somebody.
It's just such a cynical way to do science. It's so depressing.
I feel bad for you. I don't think about you at all.
There's nothing wrong with the physics in his papers. He has presented a hypothesis, not a theory, a hypothesis. He needs experiment. So, Avi Loeb has formed a collaboration. He has started a project in order to look for more interstellar objects, saying, these objects, we've seen 2 so far, we'll probably see more. We need to develop instruments with the goal of studying these objects in order to see if they're alien technology, which I think is fine. And if he had framed it that way the whole time, instead of insulting every single astronomer in the world, fine. That's great. You're Harvard, you can get the money, you can make a collaboration, you can build the telescopes. It's going to be interesting research, interesting data. Maybe you'll finish a paper. It's just that he is presenting this as the physics establishment.
So this little buffoonery is all part of you making some sort of serious argument. So you're against the nonsense bullshit, and then you just do nonsense. You just show that it is about the song and dance. It's not about doing anything else but put on a good show. Oh, pathetic.
LOL. Won't listen, and that is why he has developed his own project. But let's take a look at this project.
Let's take a look at LIGO. Okay, so they build a 2-mile long frickin' thing, 4 miles for the 2 branches. That wasn't even enough, so they built now forks off of those. So they built new tunnels, because somehow that's going to make things better if they have more tunnels. Well, anyway, and they're the whole idea was it's supposed to bounce it off a mirror and collect the photon, but no, that wasn't good enough. So they had to bounce it 1,600 times, 800 full revolution, 1,600 impacts with a mirror, and the mirrors are this thick, and they tell you that, well, we need this thick a mirror so the light bounces right off the surface. So by making a mirror a foot thick, we guarantee that the light bounces off the surface. Nobody's going to bother testing any of that as a theory? Shit.
It's called the Galileo Project. Of course it is. Maybe Galileo is his favorite scientist. I mean, if you're going to pick one, Galileo is fine. Let's read the background. There's a title about the project name. According to popular legend, after recanting under persecution his theory that the earth moved around the sun, Galileo muttered, "And yet it moves." Galileo also complained that some of the philosophers who opposed his discoveries had refused to even look through the telescope. Let's not repeat that.
Well, let's understand that that's exactly how your physics is. So again, all these arguments, you won't pay any attention to them. You just turn them all into flat earth arguments. You all say they're not worth your time. So how are you any different? Just a fact.
Your mistake. Bro, in this metaphor, who is the Catholic Church? And who is the Inquisition? Like, are all physicists the Catholic Church? Like, what? I can't believe...
Who's the Catholic Church and who's the Inquisition? She doesn't even understand that they're both the same thing. That is this. You're not just opposing the Catholic Church against the imposition. No, the imposition was the Catholic Church. Oh, brother.
Avi, no! I can't believe it. Okay, so Avi Lopez checked all the boxes. Is he a crackpot? Does he fall on this scale? And where? I mean, Avi Loeb is not old. I don't even think he's 60, so not old. It's probably not that. Is it this case? Is he correct? Now this, I would love to see. Like, what if Avi Loeb isn't publishing any, like, coherent theory or any evidence or any suggested experiment because he knows something he's not allowed to tell us, and aliens are real and aliens have visited.
So are all his papers about aliens? You didn't even make that clear. So he's published 1,000 papers. Are all the papers about alien technology?
And 3 years from now, you can just insert some B-roll of me, like, looking at a starship, like, what an idiot. I'm a jerk, you know? That would be amazing. I hope that's the case. But we don't know where he is on this scale because we don't know the outcome yet. Maybe the Galileo Project will get a bunch of evidence and have some exciting stuff to say. And I think I have to add another dimension to this plot. There's another joke in physics graduate school, like, you're in, like, hour 27 of a QFT exam, and, like, you've dropped a phase somewhere, and you have 60 pages of math that you have to dig back through, and you're just devastated. And you joke with your cohort, like, when this is all over, I'm gonna take it easy, and I'm, like, gonna sell crystals. Like, there's a group of people I could scam by saying, like, I have a physics PhD. I will make you a crystal tuned to your frequencies that will cure.
Okay, so and you're not doing that right now. You think what you're doing is credible physics when you're just talking shit. I mean, all your videos are shit about shit subjects. You posted a video about how magnets don't do any work, and there was no science in it anywhere. Where did you reference any science anywhere?
Your depression for only 3 small payments of $39.99, you know, and I can make a living like that. Or like,
yeah, you're making a living now with selling a bunch of shitty products that YouTube decides are worth people's time and energy. You know, cures for cancer, all kinds of bullshit, and you're okay taking that money.
I could write a book that's like, my PhD in physics led me to him, and like the Christian circuit would like buy it and give me speaking fees. They wouldn't read it, they don't care, but like, physicists proved God is like a selling point. But no one would do that. Right, because that is just morally reprehensible. Like, it would make you a terrible, evil person just to take advantage of vulnerable people, misrepresent your credentials, and scam them. Who would do that? Who would ruin their career? And then what? Run for Senate?
Yeah, and then, Veritasium does a video where basically he's paid to make a whole video about how great self-driving cars are. Yeah, bullshit.
Of Pennsylvania.
Miracle pill, brand new miracle.
Do you believe that there's a miracle pill out there?
There's not a pill that's going to help you long-term lose weight and live the best life without diet and exercise.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
But I was thinking, it didn't occur to us at the time, but you could do the same thing with aliens, right? Like, there is a group of vulnerable people who have had very negative experiences who really want aliens to be real, so that can explain those negative experiences. There is a market for people to talk about aliens and also sell stuff to those people. You could theoretically use your position as head of the Harvard astronomy department.
Whatever. So, yeah, there's lots of desperate idiots who are desperate to hear a fable that means they're going to have a better life because you told them this silly story about the possibility of a better life. So, yeah, a lot of people are selling snake oil. Nothing new there. People suck.
To say aliens are real, and a lot of people would be very interested in that. And you could go on podcasts with...
Sense that, over the past year I had 2,500 interviews. I had a huge interest from the public in what I do. I had a lot of pushback from people in academia, many of which are relatively junior.
With known spewers of quack information, and you could publish books that people would buy. I don't think Avi Loeb is a grifter. I listen to the podcast, and Joe Rogan keeps goading him to be like, what about pictures of aliens? What about this? And like, Avi Loeb, to his credit, could have easily been like, maybe aliens are real, but he kept saying, no, we need pictures, we need evidence. If someone produced a picture, I would look at it, but no one has. These are stories. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but I will not believe them until I have evidence. And Joe Rogan just kept being like, well, what? Lots of people say it. Isn't that evidence enough? And Avi Loeb was like, no, we need evidence.
So what are you complaining about? So all this bullshit, and the guy's not saying you should believe in them until you're demonstrating them. And so he's just arguing that, well, maybe this, and this add up to something if you put these three facts together. So if I put together the fact that protons and electrons aren't hitting the Earth, high-speed electrons and high-speed protons don't hit the space. When you put a space station out there, it doesn't get hit with a bunch of protons and electrons. That might be telling you something.
So if he was going for the scam circuit, I think he lost his opportunity there. So I read the book. This book suggests that Oumuamua is the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. He cites the physics establishment as the reason that no one else is willing to confirm this idea. Like, no one in our community is like praising him for this discovery that he has made. But what's really funny, he speaks out against the physics establishment, but in 200 pages, he says that he works at Harvard 40 times. And it's so clunky. He doesn't say when speaking with students, he says when speaking with my Harvard undergraduates. He doesn't say in my desk. He will say in my desk at Harvard at the Center for Astrophysics, where I sit as director. It's bonkers. But also, dude, you are the physics establishment.
Dude and bro. Oof.
You're the head of the Harvard astronomy department. He mentions in the book that the Oumuamua
Who should be the head of the Harvard astronomy department? Again, your astronomy is so full of crap. This wooey wormholes, dark matter, dark energy. Expanding space. Yeah, space just keeps poofing into existence. It's so annoying. All the extra space that keeps happening.
paper where he claims that aliens had a 3-day turnaround. 3 days of review, publication. And he phrases it that way as if it was such an interesting, exciting idea, when it's like, no, you posted it to the archive, the media started picking it up, the journal was like, I would really like them to click onto our journal instead of the archive, so they published it.
Right, and you don't understand how if bleeds, it leads. You don't see how your own videos are clickbait. They're clearly just clickbait. Your titles never have anything to do with the fucking video. And you don't know that's how the world works. Oh, okay. Dude, you're pretty dim, dude. You don't get it, dude? Bro duty? Bro duty? You don't get it? That's how the world works. That's how it's worked for a long time. People suck. Yeah? Bro dude?
Because you are the Harvard establishment, that paper got published. The media wanted to hear your opinion. You were able to fund a giant project in like a year. You got a book published by the Harvard Vanity Press, although I'm sure it would have been published somewhere else. I think it sold really well. When you're reading a popular science book, you sometimes question who the audience is for. Like, is it for like the layman who like might just be interested in science and pick it up at the airport? Is it for other scientists? Is it a biographical story, like a sketch of a scientist for everyone to read? This book is none of those things. It's not for laymen because he just throws things out like 21 centimeter cosmology, but he never defines what that is or why it's important. And it's not written for scientists. It's kind of written like a revisionist history, which makes me think it's written for future scientists. Like, future scientists with no understanding of what physics and astronomy was like in the 2020s will read it and form their opinion on us from this book. This book will suggest again and again that the reason astronomers will not accept the fact that Oumuamua is alien tech is because we're too conservative, and we won't even think that alien species could ever do anything that would somehow interact with us.
So again, Hawkins did this. So again, why would you even speculate? Why would you waste a neuron on some nonsense about badly motivated aliens? I mean, they have to be intelligent to get here, and you're saying their intelligence is going to be so fucking retarded that they would travel across space to torture something. What? Yeah. No, we're not even that stupid.
But, like, that's just not what astronomers and astrophysicists are like. As I said, like, SETI has existed for a long time. Exoplanet science has that as one of its main goals. You can get a PhD in astrobiology. It is just not true that Avi Loeb, as he presents in this book, is the only astronomer thinking about alien civilizations. The book suggests...
All right, so this is just so much of a nothing. So I guess we'll end here. 2 hours is more than enough. She just goes on and on and on and on and on and on, and this is not that interesting a subject. So, you could go through every single person that has a title and has a reputation, and you could point out how it's all flawed and all bullshit. That's all hype and crap that got them their prestige. Again, the New York Times headlines made Einstein. Without that New York Times headline, this was a crucial experiment for him. Everything was on the line. I mean, the fact is, if they did the eclipse thing 2 years earlier when they tried to do it and the war got in the way, the fact is he would have been proven wrong if they got the same result. If they had gotten the same result. Because he changed his theory in those 2 years. I mean, that's how weird the whole fucking thing is. It's just such a pile of shit, okay? And the history, you know, it's just a fact. It sucks that this is how the world works, that this bullshit makes things happen, that everything is just bullshit. Everything is fake news, fake science to go with the fake news. So, and you're just part of the problem, not part of the solution. Fact.